Alright, Omniscience Reap Scion build overview. I'm gonna toss in a map, show some gameplay, and then I'll go over all of the specifics of this character. This is a Reap build that is scaling the hit damage, not the damage over time aspect of it. And its main focus was for being able to do bosses very quickly with high DPS. It also maps pretty well, as you'll see here. It's not like amazing, mostly just because Reap has a limited reach of its AoE and you have to aim at every pack to hit them. But it still clears quite fine and does more than enough damage for anything you're gonna find in maps. This character at this point is pretty heavily geared, well, really heavily geared, honestly. But even on less of a budget, you can still get the damage quite high, so long as you have the few core components, which would be obviously the Omniscience Amulet and Awakened Spell Cascade support gem for your Reap, and things like a Lethal Pride, maybe decent Scepter, little bits here and there. But as you can see, I unlocked some map atlas stuff there. That's because I'm on standard. I unfortunately ripped this character yesterday, a few maps after purchasing a headhunter, to a Beyond Boss Corpse Explosion one-shot. Oops. Anyway, I'm gonna go over all the gear, and then I'll go over the gems and stuff, and then follow that up with the passive tree, and kind of just give a basic what you want, what you're looking for the gear for this character. So to start with, again, it's an Omniscience build, so you need the Omniscience, Crystallized Omniscience Amulet. This is from the new Searing Exarch boss. Basically, you just get a bunch of attribute rolls wherever you can, and it turns it into Omniscience, which gives you LE Pen and All Res. If you go to your Miscellaneous tab in your character sheet, you can see how much you have. I currently have 1750 on this character, which means I'm getting 175% All Res and 175% Elemental Pen, which is pretty good. And that's only other unique that I'm using alongside that is the Black Sun Crest helmet, and the reason this gets used is because it has 15 or up to 15% strength, dex, and int all separately, which is different from if it was just 15% increased attributes. As anything that kind of combines strength, dex, int together into like a single stat, so like if an item has plus strength and dex, or it has plus all attributes, or it has increased attributes, those end up only counting one time when it gets converted into an Omniscience. But since this is 3 separate lines, basically it converts all 3, and in the case of mine, which is a really well rolled helmet, it's a total of 44% increased Omniscience, which is a lot. If I take it off, you can probably see, yeah, I drop all the way down to 1300 just from that one slot. And then the helmet enchant, I have +1 max blood charges. That's the Reap stacking charges that gives you more damage. Any kind of like Reap enchant is good, honestly, and possibly even a reduced mana reservation for one of the auras could work. Might save some points, which would end up being a little bit of damage, but as far as single target boss damage goes, this one is the strongest enchant for it. And then everything else is just rares. I'll start with the weapon right away. The main thing for the weapon is getting a +1 to all spells roll, since it's needed to push our Purity of Fire up to level 23, which makes it give 5% base max res instead of 4. If I take the weapon off, it should show, yeah, that only gives +4. And then mine also has a +1 Fizz spells roll and a Unveiled spell damage roll. I get asked a lot about the scepter. It's actually like a very straightforward crafting method for it, very consistent. It's not necessarily cheap, but um, you can more or less guarantee it by using alterations and just spamming alterations until you get the +1 all spells. And then if you can utilize beast imprints so you don't have to do that ever again, you want to do that, and then regal orb and annulments or whatever you need to use to get it down to just the all spells roll, but as a rare weapon. And then from there you would craft prefixes can't be changed, and you would find a max rank ashling to do the ashling unveil. And whether you hit a good prefix or a good suffix, I could have hit a cast speed type unveil or double damage while focused unveil. Those would have been just as good. But just kind of repeat there from the imprint until you hit a good unveil. And then for the +1 all physical spells, all you have to do is, again, go to the bench, and you would bench craft cannot roll attack modifiers, and a harvest physical augment will guarantee +1 to all physical spells at that point. And then I just multi-modded the other mods. It's again, not cheap, but it is a very straightforward method. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the other ones, but just wanted to cover that one. The shield, the main thing we're looking for here is +3 maximum fire res, which really means you're just looking for +3 maximum fire, cold, or lightning, since they did patch it recently that you can use harvest elemental resist swap crafts to swap the max resists as well. Other good stats, like you can see on mine has spell suppression and dexterity. Those are both really good. Chaos res would be good. Strength would also be good, obviously, just as much as dexterity. Or even potentially, if you could get +2 maximum all resists alongside the +3 max fire, that could also be really powerful, as that would allow you to drop the 2 max fire res on the boots for a different implicit, which I think you can get action speed, which is very strong for just about everything. But otherwise, other than that, it's just life rolls. Hunter Exalt prefixes get 2% life every time now. Just get life. The rings are going after life rolls, cast speed, and then stat roll, chaos res, and if you can manage it, I have this one has flammability. This one has strength, cast speed, flammability. This one has dex, cast speed, chaos res. And then just kind of crafted increased damage prefixes. Not too much else to go for there on the prefix side of things. Yeah, straightforward on the rings. Body armor is probably one of the big core. This is probably the first thing you really want to spend currency investing in for the build, as it's a huge damage gain and just big gain in general. I'm using elevated warlord and an elevated redeemer mod that were then awakener orb together. The elevated percent strength mod from warlord ends up giving +1 to socketed strength gems as well, which this increased strength is good because that's increased omniscience, but the +1 socketed strength ends up being incredibly powerful because it gives +1 to our reap because it's a strength gem, but it also gives +1 to empower because it's also a strength gem. So effectively it's giving +2 to the reap, which for a single mod that's also already giving a percent strength roll is really big. And then the elevated redeemer mod is just getting even more aura effect, since we have the purity of fire scaling and a determination and zealotry for damage. It's just good damage. And the fact that they're both suffixes means you can safely craft for the prefixes after doing the awakener orb. The only way it could even kind of brick is if you hit like a really, really useless third suffix, but even then it's not the end of the world. Mine, I got lucky. I hit a decent dexterity roll. A stat roll's good there. Chaos res again is good there. And spell suppression would be probably the top one, but realistically this build gets tanky enough that you don't have to worry too much about the spell suppression rolls on gear if you can't get them, especially not early on. Gloves is mainly here for our conversion. And then I went for the unveiled attack and cast speed while focused mod. I needed to get the unveiled version so that I could bench craft the conversion prefix, since those are both otherwise unveiled mods and you can't really have them both. Unless you multi-modded, but then you're sacrificing a suffix. And then other than that, again, it's life. I would say probably in order of priority besides those is life and then the chaos resist, and then spell suppression last. And then for the implicits, you can see fire leech and unnerve on hit. You need fire leech somewhere. The gloves is just the easiest spot. In an ideal world, you would probably get your fire leech from a corruption on either the amulet or a helmet, but that's far enough into min-maxing that I wasn't even able to get it to that point after a lot of time. It's fine. You just use the glove implicit. It's good enough. Belt is, again, attributes, chaos res, life. Armor's a good bonus if you can get some. And then you could even go for 2 attribute rolls. It'd be much harder if you also want the chaos res, which I really valued on this. But you could do something like dexterity or int essences until you hit like strength, and then maybe try to force chaos res onto it afterwards. That's also an option. I just crafted some flask duration. It's been fine enough. And the belt enchant I've got is the increased AoE with Arcane Surge. There's also a crit chance. I forget what the condition is. I think it might be against unnerved enemies, which you get from the gloves. That can help with LE overload uptime, which I've been running a diamond flask to keep my elemental overload up. It would maybe be enough to let you drop it. Either one's good. I got this one first, so I stuck with the AoE. And then finally the boots. The boots are important because they have the implicit +2 max fire res. This is helping us get our resist all the way up, which, as you'll see when I go over the tree more, the build is using Melding of Flesh. I probably should have mentioned that earlier. Makes your max highest single res apply to all of your max resist. So when I turn all these purities on, you can see I have 90, 90, 90 on my resists by just scaling max fire res. And so the boot implicit for the +2 max fire, it's a high rank implicit. It's kind of annoying to get. You have to use a lot of orbs of conflict, whichever ones they work on the implicits, to just gamble it up. But other than that, boots are decently straightforward. This is the only piece I think of fractured gear I have on this character. But if you were able to find like a really good fractured pair of gloves, that's a good for a crafting base too. Since these both use the new influences, and at least at the moment, this may very well get nerfed next league. I'm kind of expecting it to. You can add the new influences to fractured items. So like you can see mine has fractured chaos res. Made crafting the suffixes to hit spell suppression and dexterity much easier. I just spammed a bunch of dexterity essences until I hit spell suppression, and then crafted the prefixes separately. But yeah, fractured. This goes for really any build that's using new influenced implicits on items. Starting with a fractured base is incredibly powerful at the moment with them. Yeah, as you can see, again, it's the same story for the stats though. Otherwise, it's chaos res, a stat roll, and spell suppression if you can get it. And then I just have a crafted movement speed because I never went for the unveiled version, which you could go for. But that covers all of these items. I mean, I kind of glossed over the flasks a little bit. The flasks are kind of whatever, honestly. I could throw in like a bottled faith for some more damage if I really wanted to. This ruby flask ain't doing too much. I mean, I even died to a boss detonate dead, even though I had this ruby flask for extra fire mitigation. Turns out bosses getting detonated is still OP. The only real big ones that I would say you have to have is the granite flask and the quicksilver. Obviously, quicksilver. Diamond flask is nice for early overload. And also having one of the flasks with life regen is really nice too, because as I go over the gems, you'll see this build runs Righteous Fire. So we'll start there now. Righteous Fire, Divergent quality gives you some extra damage, but Righteous Fire good. Now we've got Vitality and Herald of Ash in here as well. The helmet has all the other auras with a Enlighten, as high level as you can get. I think you need at least level 3 unless you want your Vitality to be extremely low level. But Purity of Elements, Purity of Fire, Determination. At this point with how much Omniscience I have, I actually don't think I need the Purity of Elements to be res capped. Oh no, I still do. It gives a lot more than I thought it did. Either way, even if I didn't need it, I would still use it for the ailment immunity. But yeah. Purity of Elements for that. Purity of Fire for the max res, because you can see if I turn that one off, I should drop down. Yeah, I go from 90 max res to 82, so that's really big. And then Determination, lots of armor. Determination. In the shield, I've got my Molten Shell, Arcane Surge support, and increased duration. So on its own, outside of when I press Vol Molten Shell because it blocks the regular Molten Shell, I can actually keep Arcane Surge up because it has enough duration that the Molten Shell comes back before the Arcane Surge fades, and I just have it on left click. I would have maybe gone with Cast When Damage Taken for the Molten Shell, but I just actually ran out of gem space and I wanted Arcane Surge. But something to think about. Boots has our other aura, which is a Divine Blessing Zealotry, but also linked to Life Tap and increased duration, so it goes off our life and lasts as long as possible. You can see it costs 1200 life. Without even pressing a flask, grabbing any leech or anything, it comes back up pretty quick, and it lasts 20 seconds. And it's just, Zealotry gives a lot of damage. Even though the build isn't crit, it still ends up giving a pretty good amount of damage, since we do have a decent amount of aura effect. And then the gloves has movement skills, flame dash, shield charge, faster attacks, and then again life tap, so that I don't have to worry about mana issues since I have almost no mana and I'm not scaling my mana regen at all. And finally, for the body armor, for the Reap is in here. The Elemental Focus, which I never got around to testing. I wanted to compare Elemental Focus to Intensify, which, assuming you stand still long enough to cast enough times to max out the stacks, it is more damage than Elemental Focus, and then it'll give you some AoE while you're mapping and clearing. It's probably just better than Elemental Focus, honestly, but I just never swapped because I was doing so much damage at that point that by the time I'd heard about using it, that I just got lazy and didn't check. Awakened Spell Cascade is the one thing you need. You really, really shouldn't play this without it, honestly. It gives a huge amount of overlap for damage, and then just gives you more coverage for clear as well. Empower, just super high damage, especially with the chest, as I showed before. Awakened Added Fire, again, is just super good damage. It has +1 socketed fizz, or supported fizz, at level 5. Well, actually at level 4, because again, if you have the body armor with the +1 strength, it also +1s this. So you would only need to level it to 4, and then it'll be 5. And then I have Awakened Unleash, which I think Awakened Unleash is probably the best support for the last one for mapping. Unleash is just really good for mapping. However, for purely boss DPS, Awakened Spell Echo is actually considerably better by like 25% DPS once you have enough cast speed. I just never was able to get my hands on one. They're hard to come by in hardcore trade. But those are all the gems. And now it is time for the passive tree. It's an Ascendant. I have Chieftain and Raider. Raider is just generally one of the best, if not the best, Ascendant passives in general. Some spell suppression, movement speed. You get Onslaught, and you get Frenzied Charge Generation for bossing. You just get both of them. And so, alongside this spell suppression and all the stuff in my gear, you can actually see I'm at 89% spell suppression chance. I'm not actually at 100. The way to get to 100 would be to have a roll on like the body armor, most likely. But you shouldn't be worried about it. Once you have, 7k plus life, and with a flask on, you're over 50,000 armor and you have 90% resists. You don't need to be at 100% suppression, but getting more is always good. Yeah. Raider, good. And then the other one is Chieftain for Marauder start. And Chieftain is also really good, and this was the reason I decided to go Fire Conversion after looking at all the other subclasses on Ascendant. 40% fire damage, great. 2% life regen, awesome. We're running righteous fire, we could use that. The totem leech one's actually useless. The cover rare unique enemies in Ash is amazing. They take 20% increased damage, which is huge. And 10% increased strength, which is again 10% increased omniscience. And then a bonus of picking 2 pure stat classes here, as these are both plus 40 for the omniscience. Because Scion otherwise has these weird ones where it's plus 20 strength and dexterity. When you convert that into omniscience, is only 20 omniscience because it doesn't count both. It just counts the plus 20. It just takes the number. So this would actually, like, if you picked a hybrid stat class here, you would actually get slightly less. But that wasn't really a deciding factor. I think Chieftain and Raider were just the best anyway. But outside of that, you can see the only thing I take off the Scion start is quickly over to this Jewel Socket for an Unnatural Instinct, which you can see it shows all the stats it's giving. Spell damage, a bunch of cast speed, a bunch of area of effect, some skill duration, some regen, and a pretty good chunk of increased physical damage. It's really powerful. The big thing is the AoE, honestly, and the regen's really nice. But it's a really good point efficiency, and otherwise, come out from the Marauder start. Get the life nodes, get Scion life, get some regen, armor, reduce damage from crits mastery. I have my Watcher's Eye here. Watcher's Eye, the main things would be some of the Zealotry DPS stuff. You can see this one has cast speed and increased damage taken from Consecrated Ground. Those are probably the 2 to go for. And then I got pretty lucky finding this one because it also has physical taken as cold with Purity of Elements, which the build has good physical mitigation. It has a lot of armor. But that is, it's still nice to have because for like extremely large hits, the armor is never going to do as much as 90% res, so that's just a little bit of extra physical mitigation, specifically against really, really big hits, which is cool. But then from there, go up into Templar a little bit, just to get the basic Templar stat stuff. Tireless is really solid for the reduced life cost, since we're spending life on everything, basically, and the Vitality Reservation Efficiency Mastery. And then Avatar Fire plus this Fire Mastery gets us 90% fire conversion, which is the gloves are finishing off the rest of it. Up here, that's where I have my Melding Jewel socketed again. Just some more life and damage and aura stuff. The 1 Cluster Jewel setup. I would have gone for some medium Cluster Jewels as well with this, but I just didn't want to drop any, like... The only thing I could really drop to get points that would have been potentially worth it would be, like, life nodes. So if you want more damage and you don't care about, like, having 8k life, you could drop life nodes to do, like, 1 or 2 small clusters. Doesn't really matter too much. The large cluster jewel is really, really good, though. It's pretty big on damage. It's a physical damage one. And then Battle Hardened is extremely strong. Physical damage and increased armor. It's a lot of armor. 30% increased armor at this point on my character, I believe, is in the neighborhood of a few thousand armor. It's very solid. This other notable isn't too impressive, as the Overwhelm doesn't do anything since we've converted. But then the third notable is another really good one, that cast speed fizz damage. And then we get the 2 more jewel sockets. Then going down, just some regen and life and stuff, and this is where the Lethal Pride goes. It hits these 4 notables. It may be able to hit just as much up here. It does. I don't think the masteries count, although maybe they do. I'm just now realizing this while recording, that this might actually count for 5. If this, or not mastery, anoint. If this anointed one is counting, it shows it on the thing, so I think it might. Either way, you could do either one then. Good time to find that out. Either way, Lethal Pride, good. Mine has a regen node, it has a max fortification that doesn't do anything, and then it has chance to deal double damage and fizz as extra fire. Those are the 2 best damage rolls, especially the double damage. But other good things are like percent increased fizz damage, percent life, percent armor, and there might be 1 or 2 more. Reduced damage taken from crits is good, but either way, you're just looking for as many useful rolls as possible, kind of. And then down here we've got Utmost Might, more Strength, Life, Soul of Steel, Max Res, Armor, and our other aura thing with the other mastery. So we can get our strong auras. I think you need both. You need both of the aura setups, both of these aura wheels for all the reservation to be able to actually run all the auras. So those are probably the two particularly important things to make your way for first. As good as the cluster jewel setup is, it eats a lot of points, so you probably save that until later. And obviously the fire conversion from Avatar Fire and the Fire Mastery are both very important as well. But otherwise you kind of just get whatever as you path by it or as you want it. Cannibalistic Right is really good for mapping since you get life on kill. Yeah, that's a tree. My pantheons of choice had been Solaris and Ralakesh. For the most part, Ralakesh is definitely really nice since we don't actually have that much Fizz degen mitigation. It's always a good one to pick up. I use this in almost every character. And then I'm not stun immune in any way. I do get the little bit of a increased stun threshold from Warrior's Blood, but I never felt that getting stunned was posing a threat to my character, so I didn't feel like I needed Brine King. So Solaris is just the next best choice for... It's the best choice for defense value, in my opinion, if you don't need the stun one. And I think that about covers everything. As far as leveling, I switched to Reap, I think, at level 75 or 80 or so. I don't think you want to play it much earlier than maps. You don't want to play it earlier than maps, I would say. But you do need some passives, and you need to have like the Omniscience Amulet and stats. The Awakened Spell Cascade, I think, is level 70 requirement at level 1 anyway. But for leveling, I just used Armageddon Brand and Cremation. And you just kind of go over towards Marauder and Templar and just get whatever fire and elemental damage you can. It's a straightforward leveling setup. But yeah, really fun build. Absolutely deletes bosses. Very, very tanky. I never really felt like at all scared of anything until I had a Strand boss get detonated on top of me. But other than that, really, really tanky. Really good build. One of the strongest characters, probably like top 3 strongest characters I've played just in general in PoE. Now granted, characters kind of just keep getting stronger over time from power creep, sure, whatever. But yeah, this one was a standout. Really, really good. That's the build. Hope you like it. Hope the video was helpful. Thanks for watching. See ya.